Here's a question that has always bothered me. Why are there doctors that are fat? Accepted as authorities in human physiology, doctors should be true experts on the cause and treatments of obesity. Most doctors are also very hardworking and self-disciplined. Since nobody wants to be fat, doctors in particular should have both the knowledge and the dedication to stay thin and healthy. So why are there fat doctors? The standard prescription for weight loss is eat less, move more. It sounds perfectly reasonable, but why doesn't it work? Perhaps people wanting to lose weight are not following this advice. The mind is willing, but the flesh is weak. Yet consider the self-discipline and dedication needed to complete an undergraduate degree, medical school, internship, residency, and fellowship. It is hardly conceivable that overweight doctors simply lack the willpower to follow their own advice. This leaves the possibility that the conventional advice is simply wrong, and if it is, then our entire understanding of obesity is fundamentally flawed. Given the current epidemic of obesity, I suspect that such is the most likely scenario. So we need to start at the very beginning with a thorough understanding of the disease that is human obesity. We must start with the single most important question regarding obesity of any disease. What causes it? We spend no time considering this crucial question because we think we already know the answer. It seems so obvious. It's a matter of calories in versus calories out. A calorie is a unit of energy, food energy, used by the body for various functions such as breathing, building new muscle and bone, pumping blood, and other metabolic tasks. Some food energy is stored as fat. Calories is the food energy that we eat. Calories out is the energy expended for all those various metabolic functions. When the number of calories we take in exceeds the number of calories we burn, weight gain results, we say. Eating too much and exercising too little causes weight gain, we say. Eating too many calories causes weight gain, we say. These truths seem so evident that we do not question whether they are actually true. But are they? And what have I been looking down and reading from? The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung. I'm here to tell you about what's in this book to entice you to go get this from your library or anywhere books are sold. This is one of my favorite weight loss books. Several years ago, I lost 60 pounds and I've been able to keep it off. Now, of course, there are things like the pandemic and eating from, working from home and eating all the time. I did put on some weight, but I was able to take that off as well. So it's been 5 years, and I'm probably still at a 50 pound weight loss. So I haven't been able to sustain all 60 pounds, and I fluctuate within 10 pounds, sometimes 15 pounds, because I have a certain job where there's food all the time. So it's difficult, but Dr. Jason Fung, go and Google his name, type it into YouTube. He's got his own channel, and there's many different podcasts or YouTubers that have interviewed him, so there's lots of good content out there on YouTube with Dr. Jason Fung, whether it be his own channel or people interviewing him. So to get into more of what he talks about in this book, he touches on some facts, nature versus nurture. So there's no relationship between adoptive parents and adoptees. So parents who were fit or fat, it didn't matter the eventual weight of a child. So it doesn't matter how you grew up. If you grew up in a household full of desserts and sodas and all that crap, doesn't mean that you're going to end up fat. So it's not the environment. Adoptees to biological parents, there's a strong correlation between weights. And so he's talking more about the DNA, right? So if your parents, biological parents, are obese, then you're likely to be obese. So it's more about basically what he goes on to say, hormones. It is that obesity is hormone related. And then he talks about calories in versus calories out. And he's got a really great story that he talks about a coal plant as an example. So if your coal plant has a delivery of, let's say, 2,000 tons of coal, and that's how much you're going to put into the furnace and burn it. And that coal plant then supplies the energy to your subdivision. And that keeps the lights on, keeps the electricity flowing. Now all of a sudden you get a truckload that is short by 5,000 tons. So you have 15,000 tons of coal. Are you going to continue to put 2,000 tons in? Are you going to keep burning 2,000 tons when your intake is only 15,000 tons? No, because you're going to run out. And what happens when you run out? Then there's not going to be enough electricity. Then there's going to be a blackout in your subdivision, right? So that's, the story that he's trying to get you to imagine. If you were to go from 2,000 calories to 15,000 calories, you think your body's going to keep burning that? No, because you're going to run out of your supply. You're going to run out of the stores, any coal that you have stored, right? So basically he's saying that reducing calorie intake for weight loss does not work. So it may work temporarily, sure, it may help you lose weight temporarily, but in the long term, it's just going to make you tired because you need those calories to make your heart function and all those metabolic functions. So it can work short term, but it's not going to help you keep the weight off. So then he goes on to say even the opposite, that there's a hypothesis if you eat too many calories, then you're going to gain weight. And there's a something on page 57 that I'm just going to read to you because it's kind of hard to paraphrase. It's just easier to read it. So let me get to page 57, which is chapter 5, the Overeating Paradox. San Feltham, a qualified master personal trainer, has worked in the UK health and fitness industry for more than a decade. Not accepting the caloric reduction theory, he set out to prove it false, following the grand scientific tradition of self-experimentation. In a modern twist to the classic overeating experience, he decided that he would eat 5,794 calories per day and document his weight gain. But the diet he chose was not a random 5,794 calories. He followed a low-carbohydrate, high-fat diet of natural foods for 21 days, and he believed, based on a clinical experience, that refined carbohydrates, not total calories, cause weight gain. The macronutrient breakdown of his diet was 10% carbohydrate, 53% fat, and 37% protein. Standard caloric calculations predicted a weight gain of about 16 pounds. So they predicted 16 pounds from what he was doing. But the actual weight gain, however, was only 2.8 pounds. Wow. Even more interesting, he dropped more than 1 inch from his waist measurement. He gained weight, but it was lean mass. He lost 1 pound or 1 inch around his waist. So he was simply one of those genetic lottery people who were able to eat anything and not gain weight. So, in the next experiment, he abandoned the low-carb, high-fat diet. Instead, for 21 days, he ate 5,793 calories. So he's only 1 calorie off from the previous diet, okay? Of a standard American diet with lots of highly processed fake foods. The macronutrient breakdown of his new diet was 64% carbs, 22% fat, and 14% protein, remarkably similar to the U.S. dietary guidelines. This time, the weight gain almost exactly mirrors what that predicted by the calorie formula. 15.6 pounds. His waist size positively ballooned by 3.6 inches. After only 3 weeks, he was developing love handles. And the same person with the almost identical caloric intake, the two different diets produce strikingly different results. Clearly, something more than calories is at work here, since the diet composition apparently plays a large role. Overeating paradox is that excess calories alone are not sufficient for weight gain, in contradiction to the caloric reduction theory. So it doesn't matter how many calories he ate. It depended on what he ate. So it's all about reducing the carbohydrates, really, and increasing your fat. So then he talks about weight loss and hormones, and there's many different hormones. We all know that. There's hormones that make you feel hungry. There's hormones that make you feel satiated. And out of all the hormones, the most important one that he talks about the most is insulin and insulin resistance. So then he goes on to talk some stories about what we can become resistant to, right? So if we have all these antibiotics and we keep taking them, and then those things that we're killing with the antibiotics, they become superbugs. You've heard that before, right? So eventually those antibiotics don't work anymore because resistance. So that's one of the examples that he gives, is that too much of anything you can become resistant to. That's what insulin resistance. That's what insulin resistance is that you have too much. So you don't want a consistent outburst of insulin. Your body makes insulin. Of course, it doesn't if you're diabetic. We're not talking about diabetics here. We're talking about people who are healthy without diabetes. If you constantly are producing too much insulin, you're going to become resistant. So you want your insulin to go like this. You want it ups and then it drops, and then it ups and then it drops. That helps you become less resistant. So how does that happen? Well, if you're eating a lot of sugar, your body needs to produce the insulin to metabolize that. So if you're constantly eating, you're kind of 6 times a day, then you're going to constantly be releasing insulin. So you want to eat less frequently. So not even 3 times a day. He goes on to talk about maybe you should skip breakfast. Maybe you should skip lunch every other day. Or if you're too busy to eat lunch, don't feel bad about it. Okay? So you want to think kind of like an example is a tiger. Tiger will go and chase his food, have a really, really, really big meal, and then be satisfied. He doesn't eat every single day. He can't always find prey every single day. So he might have a really big meal one day, and then he might go one day, he might have, maybe he'll have a bunny rabbit, like a real small snack the next day, and then he might find another big meal the other day. So he might eat every other day. So that he goes on to talk about intermittent fasting and how that helps prevent insulin resistance, because we don't want a whole lot of insulin in our body all the time, because then that stores fat. Insulin helps you store fat, so reducing insulin reduces fat storage. So here in chapter 7 on page 78, he says, I can make you fat. Actually, I can make anybody fat. How? By prescribing insulin. It won't matter that you have willpower or that you exercise. It won't matter what you choose to eat. You will get fat. It's simply a matter of enough insulin and enough time. Yikes. So I feel bad for diabetics because they got to take insulin. And so he's basically saying that diabetics are going to gain weight slowly over time no matter what. So then he talks about the diet heart hypothesis. So he's going back to 1948. The Harvard University began decades-long community-wide prospective study on diets and habits of the town in Framingham, Massachusetts. Every 2 years, all residents would undergo screening with blood work and questionnaires. High cholesterol levels in blood had been associated with heart disease, but what caused this increase? A leading hypothesis was that high dietary fat was a prime factor in raising cholesterol levels. By the 1960s, the results of the Framingham diet study were available. Hoping to find a definitive link between saturated fat intake, blood cholesterol, and heart disease, the study found, instead, nothing at all. There was absolutely no correlation. Saturated fats did not increase blood cholesterol. The study concluded no association between the percent of calories from fat and serum cholesterol levels was shown, nor between ratio of plant fat to animal fat intake and serum cholesterol levels. Did saturated fat intake increase risk of heart disease? In a word, no. Sorry, I'm stumbling so much. So, did saturated fat intake increase risk of heart disease? In a word, no. There's no final conclusion of the forgotten jewel. There is, in short, no suggestion of any relation between diet and the subsequent development of coronary heart disease in the study group. This negative result would be repeatedly confirmed over the next half-century. No matter how hard we looked, there was no discernible relationship between dietary fat and blood cholesterol. Some trials, such as the Puerto Rico Heart Health Program, were huge, boasting more than 10,000 patients. Other trials lasted more than 20 years. The results were always the same. Saturated fat intake could not be linked to heart disease. But the researchers had drunk the Kool-Aid. They believed their hypothesis so completely that they were willing to ignore the results of their own study. For example, in the widely cited Western Electric study, the authors note that amount of saturated fatty acids in the diet were not significantly associated with the risk of death from CHD. This lack of association, however, did not dissuade the authors by concluding the results support the conclusion that lipid composition of the diet affects serum cholesterol, concentrated, and risk of coronary death. These findings should be buried. These findings should have buried the diet heart hypothesis, but no amount of data could dissuade the diehards that dietary fat caused heart disease. Researchers saw what they wanted to see. Instead, researchers saved the hypothesis and buried the results. They buried the results over and over again for years, centuries, decades. Sorry, not centuries. I meant to say decades. It's just crazy. They didn't want to admit to the world that their hypothesis was wrong, and it happened over and over again. So what they're saying is, can you eat red meat? Yes. It's not going to give you heart disease. All right. So my next bookmark. So what do we do? There are 5 basic steps in weight loss. Number 1, reduce your consumption of added sugars. Number 2, reduce your consumption of refined grains. And those 2 go into insulin resistance. The more you eat sugars, the more you eat grains, because grains, carbs, your body turns that into sugar, so it's all just sugar. You're going to release insulin, and insulin causes weight gain and holding on to weight. So if you have a lot of insulin, you're going to hold on to that weight. You're not going to be able to lose it. Number 3, moderate your protein intake. Number 4, increase your consumption of natural fats. Red meat, it's okay. And number 5, increase your consumption of fiber and vinegar. So it goes on to talk about all those healthy things. And then he goes on to when to eat in chapter 20 on page 235. And he's basically talking about intermittent fasting, which I've already talked about. So that is the Obesity Code in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed that. Go look up Dr. Jason Fung. Like I said, he's got his own YouTube channel, and he's got plenty of different people that have interviewed him on their channel. So I hope you will join me next time. Please like, subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.